Hi guys. One of the ways I try to live my life is to have the assumption or the belief that everyone has a story and that everyone's story is important. And that kind of puts me in a place where I'm curious about people and I want to ask them about who they are and the way they tick, and I want to spend time with them, invite them over to my house, go spend time having a cup of coffee or having a beer with them, and just to learn people's story, because I believe everyone has a story. And of course all of our stories are important, but one of the things I've learned as well is that all of our stories, they're caught up in bigger stories of our family, of our work, of our nations. The list goes on. And I'm interested in stories because stories tell us, among other things, how we got here, what our identity is, what's wrong with the world, and who the bad guys are. Big stories, the big stories that try to explain as much about the human existence in the world as possible, they have a plot. They tell us where we are going and how to fix what's been broken. Often they have someone who makes fixing what is broken possible, and this person is the hero. And big stories, they also have an ending. They tell us where we are going and what will happen when we get there. And the big story that I'm most familiar with, I like to call the story of God. And the story of God has an ending, which maybe you could more accurately describe as a new beginning. So according to the big story of God, there's something wrong with the world, but what's wrong can be made right again. And to get to that new beginning, the brokenness that's in the world, it needs to end. And Jesus, as the hero of God's story, does exactly that. We see in God's story that Jesus, the hero of God's story, he defeats death and he offers to us resurrection life. Not only does Jesus do that, Jesus ends exile by giving to us and empowering us with the Holy Spirit, his Spirit. And thirdly, Jesus, we see in God's story that Jesus is on a mission to make all things new. That is, that Jesus, his purpose now is to fix everything that's been broken. And so we're going to focus on that idea of the end of exile. So let me read to you from Acts chapter 1, verse 8, which is a part of the Bible. And it says this is Jesus speaking to his disciples after his resurrection, before he's just about to ascend into heaven. This is what he says to his disciples. But you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth. So, as the Bible tells the story, we were never meant to be alienated from God. We were never meant to be separated from him. We were never meant to have this sense of there's a distance, or how can I approach God? God was always meant to be right there with us every step of the way. But in fact, we were made in the image of God. We were made in the image of God to represent him, and we were made in the image of God to be in relationship with him, to partner with him. But humans, the bad guys of God's story, they rebelled against God. And that was a betrayal that broke the relationship between humans and God. It was a betrayal that introduced corruption into the relationship between humans and God. And the result of that relational betrayal by humans rebelling against God, the result was humanity, we were exiled from God's presence. And later on in the story, God chooses a people to represent him, to be blessed by him, and to know his name and to know his character and to share who he is with the rest of the world, so that as they are blessed, they can also be a blessing to the rest of the world. So later in the story, this chosen people, Israel, chosen to bless the world, they actually also rebel against God. There's periods of faithfulness, but there's also extended periods of unfaithfulness where they're rebelling against God. And they repeatedly rebel against God. And it kind of comes to a crescendo where they also are exiled from God's presence. Humans are drawn in to partner with God. They rebel against him and he exiles them from his presence. But the true human, the hero of God's story, Jesus, he achieved something on the cross and through his resurrection. And what he achieves, amongst many things, is that exile can end. And not only can it end, it is also such that it can never be a possibility ever again. This passage where Jesus is speaking about pouring out his Spirit on his people, this passage comes as Jesus is ascending into heaven. And you might be, you can be forgiven for asking the question, well, is he leaving them? Is this a sort of exile? And in a way, yes, he is leaving them, but in a more profound way, Jesus tells them that he will give them his Spirit, the Holy Spirit, God the Spirit. And we learn as we continue on in the story that the Spirit now dwells amongst us, amongst humans, and within us. And that our bodies are actually not just bodies, but they're literally temples of the Holy Spirit. God, by His Spirit, lives within us. You can't get a more definitive end to exile than that. Exile is over. And actually, it's been replaced with an intimacy greater than anything found in God's story, including the Garden of Eden. At the beginning of the story, God would meet with Adam and Eve in the cool of the evening with His representatives, the people made in His image, and he would chat with them, he would hang out with them, find out what's going on, find out how He can help, find out, hear the report from Adam and Eve. And so there was intimacy there, and we might think, oh wow, wouldn't it be great to go back to that level of intimacy? Actually, because of what Jesus has done, we have even greater intimacy than that. The Holy Spirit, God's Spirit, dwells amongst us, within us. But there's actually more. The good news is that Jesus makes it possible for us to be truly human by renewing the image of God in us and empowering us with His Spirit so that we can partner with Him as agents of renewal, fixing everything that's been broken. What was always intended to be and was broken when humans rebelled has been fixed because of Jesus. God and humans dwelling together, working together, partnering to bring flourishing to the world. Christians, and if you're a Christian here listening to this, then you can listen in. I'm speaking to you. Christians often call themselves followers of Jesus, but can fall into the trap of acting like Jesus is going nowhere. Actually, Jesus is on the move. Jesus isn't stationary. He's on the move by His Spirit, and He's on a mission to fix everything that's been broken. For Christians to be non-hypocritical as followers of Jesus, it makes sense that we would follow Him in this mission. As Christians get about Jesus' kingdom activity of cultivating creation and fixing everything that was broken, relying on His Holy Spirit guidance and power, the hope is we will see transformation that benefits us, absolutely, but also the entire community around us, or the whole world. Christians, non-Christians, humans, or the rest of creation. Blessed because of people who say they follow Jesus by the power of the Spirit actually following Jesus. Great. So that's what Christians can gain from this, and maybe that's good, but what about everyone else? Maybe you're not a Christian here listening today. I'm so grateful that you're here with us. Well, for people who aren't Christians, I think it offers hope, perhaps. If the story of God is true and the result of our rebelling against God was to be exiled from His presence, then it's good news that we no longer need to live in exile. It's good news that we can be in the presence of God. It's an explanation for the loneliness we feel in our lives, this sense of disconnection, our existential angst. The relationship we were made for that was broken can be repaired. The intimacy we long for, to know and be known, can be experienced. It's good news that we can be in the presence of God. I don't know what you think of the story of God. You might think it's crazy. But at the very least, yes, maybe it is crazy, and you're allowed to think whatever you want to think about it. But at the very least, it does explain why we long to be accepted, known, embraced for who we are, warts and all. And I think it offers us exactly that. No more need to wear a mask. No more need to perform. No more need to look a certain way, act a certain way, or even believe certain things. The story of God says exile from the one we were made for can be over because of what Jesus has done. And you know what? To me, this makes sense. And maybe you think it's crazy. That's okay. But actually, I am interested in your thoughts. And I have some questions here. So let's see. I'll be interested in what you think. Does this part of the story make sense of something you felt or experienced in your life? Have you ever felt alone? Have you ever felt like you wanting to be accepted? Have you ever felt like something important is missing? A key relationship in your life is missing? Does it frame the things you see in the world in a useful way? This part of the story. According to the story, when humans betrayed God, He exiled them from His presence. What do you think about that? Do you think that was fair? What kind of consequences do you think that would lead to? What does this idea of being exiled from God's presence actually mean? What does that look like? What does that lead to? What's the fruit of that? And why would God want to end our exile? If we rebelled against Him, then why would He want to end the exile? And then the final set of questions. In the logic of the story, What do you think it means that exile is over? That we can have greater intimacy with God than ever before? Is that comforting, that idea? Is it scary? Is it something else? What could it mean? What could it actually mean practically for our lives in 21st century Melbourne? What could it mean for our everyday lives? Be super interested in your thoughts and comments, and hopefully I can hear them from you sometime. All right, thanks guys.